That embarrassing detail you told them weeks ago, they're going to use it today. Why is the worst attack always based on information you freely gave them? This is the dark psychological paradox of reality mining, a covert operation to harvest your vulnerabilities.
Just let that sink in for a second. The real sting of betrayal isn't just the attack itself, is it? It's that gut-punching realization that the weapon they're using against you is something you handed them yourself. You gave it to them in what you thought was a moment of trust or intimacy, and that experience is just so confusing and painful, and it can really knock you off balance.
And that right there is the central question we're going to unpack. It feels like a total paradox, doesn't it? The idea that our own vulnerability, our very human desire to connect, can be methodically turned into ammunition against us. Well, I'm here to tell you it is not a coincidence, and it is not your fault. It's actually the result of a very deliberate, very calculated strategy. And that strategy has a name: reality mining. Let's just break those words down because they're important. Covert operation, that means it's happening right under the surface, completely disguised as something else, right? Like genuine interest or even flirtation. And harvest, that implies this systematic gathering process, kind of like a farmer collecting a crop. Only in this case, the crop is your secrets, your fears, and all your insecurities.
So how do we get from being a target to being secure? Well, to really understand and defend against this, we're going to follow this exact roadmap. We'll start by defining the operation itself, then we'll break down its three-stage mechanism. After that, we'll dive into the psychology of both the manipulator and the target. And then, the best part, we'll get you set up with a powerful counterintelligence strategy so you can take back control and assert your own informational sovereignty.
Okay, so first things first, let's get a really clear picture of the battlefield. Before we can even start talking about defense, we have to understand the nature of the attack. You see, this isn't about random arguments or someone losing their temper. This is about intelligence gathering, pure and simple.
At its very core, reality mining is all about a quest for leverage. And the key word here is systematic. This isn't just a person who's a good listener, no. This is someone who is actively cataloging your triggers, your weaknesses, and your core values with a very specific purpose in mind: to gain power over you. Every single piece of information they collect is designed to tip the scales in their favor.
Now, it's really important to get this. This isn't just some bad habit someone has. It's a cornerstone technique for people with very specific psychological profiles. For those who have what's often called the dark triad of traits, that's Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism, the world is basically seen as a competitive arena. And in that arena, information isn't about connection, it's about power. And reality mining is their #1 method for getting it.
So, how do they actually pull this off? How do they get the information? Well, they use some pretty sophisticated social engineering tactics. Feigned vulnerability. That's the classic "I'll show you mine if you show me yours," where they offer up a tiny, often made-up vulnerability to trick you into sharing a much bigger, real one. Then there's emotional mirroring. This is when they reflect your own energy and values right back at you, creating this powerful illusion that you've found a soulmate, which makes you feel totally safe to overshare. And triangulation. That's using a third person, real or not, to pry information out of you, like saying, well, so-and-so told me they were worried about you because...
And all of this points to a long-term goal. See, the information they're gathering isn't for right now. It's being stored away like an investment in future control. The whole objective is to build a detailed psychological dossier on you, so that when, not if, they decide to attack or manipulate, the strike isn't some wild swing in the dark. No, it's a precision-guided missile aimed directly at your deepest insecurity, guaranteeing it's as painful and as effective as it can possibly be.
This brings us to the playbook itself. Now that we understand the what and the who, we can really deconstruct the how. Because this isn't a random act of cruelty. It follows a predictable, three-stage pattern. And you know what? Knowing this pattern is the very first step to disrupting it for good.
Here it is, the manipulator's playbook, laid completely bare. First, they source the data through what is basically a covert interrogation. Second, they map your vulnerabilities and create a psychological profile. And third, they strategically deploy that information when it serves them best. Let's break each of these down.
Stage 1, data sourcing. This is by far the most deceptive phase. This is where the mining happens. And it doesn't feel like an interrogation at all. It feels like the most engaging conversation you've ever had. It might be disguised as intense romantic interest, or deep friendship, or even professional mentorship. They ask these probing questions that seem to show they care so deeply, but what they're really doing is collecting raw data points about your life.
And they're not just looking for any old information. Nope. They are mining for the crown jewels of your psyche. They're targeting 3 core areas. Attachment. What are your deepest fears about being left alone? Who hurt you in the past? Self-worth. What are you ashamed of? What failure keeps you up at night? And resources. What are your financial pressures, your time constraints? This information basically gives them direct access to your emotional control panel.
So next comes stage 2, vulnerability mapping. And this is where the calculated nature of this whole thing becomes, well, chillingly clear. The data points they collected in stage 1 aren't just tossed in a mental shoebox. They are assembled, connected, and analyzed to create a detailed map of your mind. They learn exactly which buttons to push and in what sequence to get a specific emotional reaction. They are, in effect, creating an operating manual for you without your consent.
Finally, stage 3, strategic deployment. This is the moment that hook we started with becomes terrifyingly real. Weeks or even months after you shared a secret in confidence, it's suddenly thrown back in your face during an argument. It might be used to gaslight you. You're only upset because you're insecure about that failure you told me about. Or it's used for coercive control. If you leave, who else would put up with someone who has your kind of baggage? The time delay is the key. It's what makes the attack so disorienting and so incredibly cruel. So now we see the mechanism. But for this operation to actually work, it takes 2 people. So let's explore the psychology at play on both sides of this toxic equation. Why is the manipulator so driven to do this, and what makes a target so vulnerable to these tactics? And this right here shows the tragic mismatch. The manipulator is driven by a need for risk mitigation and supply security. The secrets they collect are an insurance policy. If you ever think about exposing them, well, they've got dirt on you too. It secures their narcissistic supply by making sure you're too controlled or ashamed to leave. But on the other side, the target is just operating from a place of healthy human desire. We have a natural drive to build trust through sharing. We have a fundamental need to be liked and accepted. The manipulator simply exploits this beautiful, healthy desire for connection and treats it like a weakness to be mined.
Okay, we've analyzed this problem in detail. We've defined the terms, we've mapped the mechanism, we've understood the psychology. Now we shift from analysis to action. This brings us to the most important question of all. How do you defend yourself? You need a counterintelligence strategy.
Your defense plan is a clear, actionable 3-step process. First, you learn to identify the reconnaissance phase. Second, you implement a strategic boundary. And third, you develop a tactic to use when your boundary has already been breached. Let's look at each of these countermeasures.
Step 1 is all about recalibrating your definition of intimacy. Think about it. Healthy curiosity is reciprocal. It flows both ways. Disproportionate curiosity, on the other hand, feels like an interview. You find yourself an hour into a conversation, you've talked all about your deepest fears, and you realize you know almost nothing about them. When a conversation is all take and no give, you have to learn to recognize that as a red flag. It is not intense interest, it's intelligence gathering. Step 2 is a proactive defense, the information blackout. Now, this does not mean you become a cold, closed-off person. It just means you practice information rationing. Your deepest vulnerabilities, your traumas, your financial situation, your core insecurities, that's privileged information. It should only be shared with people who have earned that trust over a long period of time through consistent, reliable, supportive actions. Trust is built with actions, not with probing questions. And step 3 is your reactive defense. Let's call it the reverse audit. When a manipulator deploys one of your secrets against you, instead of getting defensive about the secret itself, you calmly disrupt their entire frame by asking, "That's interesting, when did I tell you that?" This simple question is so incredibly powerful. It forces their covert tactic right out into the open. It makes them accountable for how they got and stored that information, and it reminds you, in real time, that a trusted confidence has been weaponized. And all of these steps, they lead to one final empowering outcome: asserting your personal and informational sovereignty. Let's bring everything we've covered together into one final clear takeaway. So let's bring it all home. First, remember that reality mining is the name of the covert operation behind how manipulators gather your secrets long before they use them. Just knowing the name helps demystify it. It turns it from this mysterious power into a calculated tactic that you can actually spot. We've seen its predictable pattern.
That data sourcing phase, disguised as intimacy, is used to build a comprehensive vulnerability map. A map not for understanding you, but for controlling you, with information that's deployed strategically down the road for gaslighting and coercive control.
But here is the most important part of all. Awareness breaks the loop. By identifying that disproportionate curiosity early and by implementing an information blackout boundary, you simply refuse to provide them with the raw materials for their map. You deny them future leverage. You assert your informational sovereignty.
So we'll end with this question to take with you. As you move through your relationships, new and old, ask yourself this: who in your life is consistently earning your trust through their actions, and who is just mining it with their questions?